Hey, beautiful, please consider subscribing to our channel if you've been enjoying these stories. Your support helps a lot. Aid us in reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
I was standing in my kitchen staring at the rain pounding against the window pane when the notification lit up. My phone, your order has been delivered. The words were a beacon after a brutal week of overtime deadlines and office politics that had left me mentally fried and physically hollow. I had splurged on a delivery from the Ember House, an upscale chef-curated kitchen that only served through apps, and only to certain zip codes. It was a Friday night ritual I had been saving up for, and the $580 price tag was ridiculous, but I figured if I was going to indulge it, might as well be memorable. The kitchen smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and anticipation. I walked to the front door, heart already prepping for the first whiff of truffle-seared steak and rosemary potatoes. My hand twisted the knob with excitement. I pulled open the door, and there was nothing. Just wet concrete and a soggy welcome. Mat, no bag, no box, no steaming containers. Only a mocking empty space where luxury was supposed to meet me. I blinked, stepped outside, and looked left, then right. Not even a trail of wet footprints. The rain kept falling harder now, as if trying to wash away the evidence of what I knew should be there. The photo attached to the app said it had been delivered. Right. To my porch. It showed my exact door. My mat. My faded brick steps. I texted the driver. "Hey, sorry to bug, but I think the food was taken." The reply came fast. I dropped it off. Like 3 minutes ago, a lady was walking up to the door, thought, maybe it was for her. My stomach dropped. Lady walking up. There was only one person who ever roamed the neighborhood, like she was patrolling a demilitarized zone. Karen, my HOA president. She was a retired teacher, turned local tyrant, who had somehow convinced the board to hand her full control of the neighborhood's aesthetics order and moral purity. She fined my neighbor for parking 1 inch onto the sidewalk, and once issued a written warning for a kid's inflatable dinosaur pool toy. My first real clash with her was 6 months ago when I hung a string of decorative lanterns on my patio. 2 days later, I got a notice in the mail: unapproved exterior modifications. Fine, $125. She never smiled unless it was smug, and she walked like every sidewalk. Segment was her throne room. I bolted back inside to check the doorbell camera footage. The video loaded with a jitter of anticipation, and I hit play. There she was, Karen, pastel cardigan hair, shellacked into a silver helmet smile sharp enough to slice an apple. She picked up the entire Ember House delivery bag casually, like it was a gift from the heavens. She looked at it, tilted her head, squinted as if confirming what it was, then turned and walked away. No hesitation, no knock, no question, just took. I watched her disappear down my walkway, clutching my dinner like a lioness carrying off a fresh kill. There was no way this was a mistake. I threw on my jacket and stomped out into the rain. By the time I reached her house, 2 streets over, I was soaked and steaming. Her porch lights were on. Of course, they were always on. She answered after 2 knocks and a doorbell press. "Oh, Ryan," she said, with that tone, the one that's sweet on top, but frosted with mockery. "What a surprise to see. You here? I didn't waste time. I have video of you taking my delivery from my porch. That food wasn't yours, and it sure as hell wasn't meant for you." Her face didn't even twitch. I assumed it was misdelivered, she said, brushing invisible dust off her blouse. It didn't have a name tag, and you know how unreliable those drivers can be these days. I stared at her. "So you just took it?" "Well," she said with a shrug, "it would have gone bad in the rain. I figured I'd at least enjoy it." instead of letting it spoil. "You stole it," I said. "That was $580 worth of food." Her eyes widened with false innocence. "That much for dinner," she said with a scoff. "What a wasteful use of money. No wonder this neighborhood has budget issues." I took a step forward, the rain dripping off my sleeves. "Give it back." She blinked, then smiled. "Oh, honey, it's gone now, and it was lovely. I especially liked the saffron risotto." She shut the door before I could speak again. I stood there in disbelief, my jaw clenched, my fists trembling from more than just the cold. Back home, I paced. I could feel something inside me boiling, and it wasn't hunger. It was the casual way she did it. The idea smug entitlement, like she believed everything on this block belonged to her. I tried the HOA hotline first. The voicemail was chipper. "Hi, you've reached the Sunnyside Bluff HOA. Leave a message, and our president will get back to you." Of course, she was the one who checked them. I didn't bother. Next, I posted in the neighborhood forum app describing what happened without naming names. The post lasted 7 minutes. Deleted reason: community guidelines. Violation: Karen was an admin. This wasn't just a stolen dinner, it was war. The next morning, a letter appeared in my mailbox. Violation notice: excessive plant growth on property perimeter. Fine $75. I didn't even have a hedge on the perimeter. She was retaliating. I vented to my friend Jordan, who lived 2 blocks over. "She's weaponizing the HOA," I said. He laughed a little nervously. "She always does this, man. Just pay the fine. Let it go, she'll move on." "She stole from me." I said, "This isn't petty. This is criminal." "But who's going to stop her?" he asked. "She runs the whole board." The truth settled like a lead weight in my chest. She had power, not real power. Not legal power, but the kind that came from bureaucracy and manipulation and fear. People let her walk over them, because standing up to her meant dealing with the swamp of HOA politics and the exhaustion that came with it. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I opened a new browser, tab, pulled up my doorbell footage, saved the clip. Then I started researching theft laws, thresholds for larceny state definitions, HOA bylaws. My rage was aflame, and now I was building a torch by nightfall. I had compiled every piece of evidence into a single folder I called the Police Non-Emergency Line, and explained the situation. They were sympathetic, but said the total had to exceed a certain amount before it was considered grand larceny. They said I could file a report, but without a pattern or receipts, it would likely be dismissed. Karen knew that she was counting on that. She thought I'd give up, thought I'd grumble, and pay my fines, and shrink back, like everyone else. But she didn't know me. She didn't know I was already planning my next delivery. She didn't know I was baiting a trap, and she definitely didn't know that her smug smirk had just cost her everything. Not yet, but she would. The next Friday, I placed another order, same restaurant, same extravagance, only this time I doubled it, $1,230, Wagyu steak glazed duck scallops with white truffle sauce plus desserts, crafted by a French-trained pâtissier. It was a feast meant for 5, ordered for 1. But I had no intention of eating it. I needed bait, and this was gourmet grade. I installed a second camera the day before, a hidden one disguised as a solar light angled directly at the driveway. The original doorbell cam caught the porch, but if Karen struck again, I wanted the full picture. When the delivery driver called to confirm arrival, I asked them to wait by the curb and walk up slowly. I stood behind the curtain, watching, heart thudding every second. Dragging like a drumbeat in a courtroom, he placed the bag carefully on the mat, turned and walked away. The moment he disappeared from frame, she emerged. Right on cue. Karen strolled up the walk like she had choreographed it, rehearsed every step, same. Pastel cardigan this time. Lavender, her hair wound tighter than a noose. She bent down, lifted the bag and smiled to herself, like she was unwrapping Christmas morning. I let her walk away again. Because this time, I was ready. Once she disappeared, I reviewed. Both camera feeds, crystal clear, multiple angles. No ambiguity, she was on my private property, lifting an expensive delivery off my doorstep and leaving without permission. I printed stills from the footage, high resolution labeled timestamps included, gathered the digital receipt and a notarized statement from the delivery driver who remembered seeing her and said he felt weird about it but didn't want to cause drama. Then I went to the police. This time, they took me seriously. The total crossed the felony threshold, and I had hard evidence. The officer at the front desk was polite, but his eyebrows lifted when he saw the footage. "That's a bold move," he said, as he filled out the incident report. "Usually when this happens, it's porch. Pirates, not neighbors in cardigans," I smiled without humor. "Trust me, she's worse than pirates. Pirates don't hand out fines for leaving trash cans out too long," he chuckled, and assured me they'd follow up. I left the station feeling something I hadn't felt since moving into that neighborhood. Power that evening, the sun dipped low and golden light stretched across my yard. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and waited around 7:30. Karen appeared on her porch, next door, drink in hand, talking loudly to a couple of other board members who had dropped by. She was laughing, unbothered. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to shout across the lawn that her days of domination were done, but I held it in, let the storm build quietly, let it catch her by surprise. 2 days later, an officer knocked on her door. I watched from my window as she answered, still in her gym clothes. Hair pulled back, face flushed from either exercise or the sudden realization that this was real. She tried to wave it off at first. I could tell from her body language, the shrug, the exaggerated eye roll, but the officer handed her something, a white sheet. She looked at it, then looked back at him, and her whole posture changed. She closed the door slowly, not a slam. Slow, deliberate shut, like she was trying to control the narrative. Even now I waited. 10 minutes later, I got the knock, same officer, same clipboard, just checking in. He said, I nodded, invited him in, and offered coffee. He declined, but smiled politely. "We're moving forward with the charge," he said. "Given the value and repeat nature, the DA wants to pursue it as grand larceny." I didn't respond right away. I just nodded and let the words soak through every corner of my brain. Grand larceny. That wasn't a slap on the wrist. That was courtrooms, fingerprints, probation, or worse. Karen had committed a felony over dinner over. Ego, I should have felt vindicated. But in truth, I felt something else. The weight of justice coming down slowly, like a glacier, silent, but unstoppable. Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed with rumors. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The whisper network carried everything. Someone said, Karen got a citation. Someone else claimed she was under investigation by Tuesday. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting, closed door, only board members, but people started watching her differently. Even her allies were quieter now, less inclined to laugh at her passive-aggressive jabs. I ran into Mr. Collins, the treasurer at the EIB community mailbox, and he nodded awkwardly. "How's everything?" he asked, eyes darting. "Great," I said. "Just great." The following Friday, I received a letter slipped under my door, typed anonymous. "We appreciate what you did. She's had this place In a chokehold for too long. If you need support, we're with you. No name, just courage. It was spreading. The fear was cracking. I felt like a domino had been pushed, and the whole row was starting to fall. But Karen wasn't done. She had one last play, and I should have seen it coming. On Monday, I got another violation notice. This one citing my trash bins again, same as before. But this time it was dated 3 days prior. Before the officer visit, she was trying to predate it, build a defense, argue that I was retaliating or causing drama. I took it straight to the HOA office, where her assistant Beth sat at the front desk, pretending to do nothing. I placed the notice on the counter. This was backdated intentionally, I said calmly, and I have security. Footage proving no such infraction occurred. Beth looked flustered. I'll, pass that on to the board. You do that, I said, and let them know the city's been informed. I hadn't contacted the city yet, but I would. An hour later, another note arrived. This time not anonymous, signed by 3 other residents. We are requesting an audit of the HOA actions. Under Karen's leadership, attached were copies of similar unfair citations, fines, questionable practices, even photos of her using HOA. Maintenance workers to clean her gutters. It was happening. One by one, people were standing up. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about all of us. She had ruled by isolation, kept us in separate cages. Now we were linking arms, and she was the one backed into a corner. The doorbell rang that evening. I opened it to find Karen standing there without a cardigan this time, in a plain windbreaker, her face stiff. I'd like to speak, she said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She glanced around, lowered her voice. This has gotten out of hand. I said nothing. She continued. I'll pay for the food both times. No argument. I'll write the check right now. I tilted my head. You're worried about jail time. Her mouth tightened. I don't want this to escalate further for either of us. I looked her dead in the eye. It already did when you committed a felony. She said nothing. I turned to go back inside. She reached out, not touching me, but gesturing helplessly. I've given years to this community. And stolen from it too, I said, and shut the door gently. Behind it, I leaned against the frame. She was cracking. Not because she felt guilty, but because the armor of control she had built was failing, and she had no weapons left that people feared. I opened my phone and refreshed the email inbox. New message from the district attorney. Investigation proceeding, preliminary court date to be set next week. And there it was, the final lock clicking into place. The storm was almost here, and this time she was the one with no shelter. The morning of the hearing dawned crisp and clear, a deceptive calm before the storm. I woke with a jittery energy, a cocktail of nerves and anticipation mixing in my gut like a brewing tempest. This was it, the moment where all the pieces I had painstakingly gathered would collide under the harsh glare of the courtroom. Dressed in my sharpest outfit, I rehearsed the details again and again. Every photo, every statement, every second of video evidence was etched in my mind like a script I had to deliver flawlessly. The stakes were higher than ever. Karen's arrogance was no longer just a neighborhood nuisance. It was about to be held accountable, exposed for all the community to see. At the courthouse, the air buzzed with a mix of tension and curiosity. Neighbors filed in, some casting furtive glances my way, others whispering fervently among themselves. Karen arrived last, flanked by an expensive-looking attorney whose cold smile didn't reach his eyes. Her confident posture seemed to say she hadn't lost yet, that she still believed her games could win in this new arena. The courtroom was small but formal. The judge, A stern woman with keen eyes and an aura of no-nonsense authority called the session to order. The prosecutor wasted no time laying out the charges: grand larceny over $500, theft from a private residence, and repeated violations that spoke to a pattern of abuse and entitlement. The room hung on every word. Karen's defense tried to paint the incident as a harmless mistake, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. They argued the delivery was left unattended, the line between private and communal property was unclear, and that she had no intention to steal. Their tone was slick, rehearsed, a stark contrast to the raw evidence I had brought forth. As the prosecutor played the footage, the room shifted. Karen's smug expression faltered as the undeniable images of her lifting the bag, walking away with a triumphant smile, played on the screen. The delivery driver's sworn testimony was read aloud, detailing his discomfort and witnessing of the theft. It was a blow to her carefully constructed defense. I felt a wave of vindication wash over me, but I kept my face neutral. This was far from over. Then came Karen's turn. She took the stand, voice sharp and practiced. She claimed stress, community duty, and the pressure of HOA responsibilities clouded her judgment. But as she spoke, cracks appeared, her eyes darting, hands trembling slightly. The arrogance that once fueled her words now seemed like a mask slipping under the weight of consequences. The prosecutor's questions were surgical. Did you consider the legal ramifications of your actions? Were you aware of the value of the stolen property? Why did you repeatedly issue fines against neighbors yet dismiss this serious violation of your own? Each query exposed her duplicity and entitlement. Outside the courtroom, whispers grew louder. Social media accounts of the neighborhood lit up with live updates and commentary. Hashtags trended overnight, labeling Karen as the food thief and HOA tyrant. Memes flooded in, some cruel, others just plain funny, but all fueling public humiliation. The weight of public opinion was turning merciless. Her allies in the HOA dwindled. Several sent me private messages, expressing regret and support. The community was shifting beneath her feet like quicksand, and her grip was loosening. The judge called a recess, and Karen disappeared behind the heavy wooden doors. I stepped outside to find a crowd gathered, neighbors eager to share their stories of harassment, fines, and petty cruelties inflicted by Karen's reign. The floodgates had opened. That afternoon, the hearing resumed with witness testimonies from other residents. Each spoke of Karen's relentless control, her vindictive citations, and the toxic atmosphere she created. Her facade of community spirit crumbled further with every word. The defense tried desperately to salvage the case, but their arguments were feeble. They failed to counter the avalanche of evidence and witness accounts, painting a portrait of a woman who abused her position for personal power and gain. As the day drew to a close, the judge delivered a warning. The case would proceed, with sentencing likely to be severe should Karen be found guilty. The room buzzed with a mixture of relief and anticipation. I left the courthouse exhausted but exhilarated. The long battle was nearing its climax, and justice was finally within reach. But I knew this was not just about a stolen meal or petty fines anymore. It was about reclaiming a community from the grip of fear and control. Karen's downfall was no longer a question of if, but when. And when it came, it would be spectacular. The sun set behind the courthouse as I walked away, my heart steady but my mind racing with what was still to come. The final act was approaching, and I was ready. The courtroom was packed the day of sentencing, the air thick with anticipation, and a buzz that felt electric, like the calm before a storm breaking loose. I sat in the front row, the same sharp suit, but my hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the gravity of what was about to unfold. Karen entered last, her usual confident stride, faltering just a bit as she scanned the sea of faces. Some familiar, some strangers, all eyes fixed on her. She sat with a forced calm, clutching the armrests like they might anchor her against the tide of consequences that was crashing down. The judge presided with steady authority, her gaze sharp as she began to speak. After reviewing all evidence, testimonies, and the defendant's conduct, it is clear that this was not an isolated incident, but a deliberate act of theft over $500, constituting grand larceny. A hush fell over the room as the judge continued, "This court finds the defendant guilty, as charged." Karen's face paled, the arrogance melting away, leaving only a raw vulnerability. I caught a glimpse of something deeper behind her eyes, perhaps regret or fear, or a sudden recognition of her own downfall. The prosecutor laid out the sentence with clinical precision: fines, restitution, community service, and a jail term suspended with strict probation, but the threat loomed heavy. Should Karen violate probation or repeat any offense, she would face immediate incarceration. The courtroom erupted with murmurs, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. I felt a surge of triumph, but tempered with something more profound. This was justice, but it was also a moment of reckoning for a neighborhood shackled by fear. Now, free to breathe. Karen looked around one last time, her lips twitching as if to say something, but no words came. Instead, she rose slowly and exited the room, her steps heavy but resolute. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters clamored, neighbors cheered, and social media exploded with posts celebrating the verdict. The viral memes had turned Karen from feared tyrant to cautionary tale. Overnight, her Instagram was flooded with comments from strangers and locals alike, sharing their own stories and laughing at the nickname that had stuck, Food Thief Karen. She was a meme, a symbol of what happens when entitlement crosses the line. The community's spirit lifted as healing began. Neighbors who once avoided conflict started conversations. Kids played freely again, and the HOA board reorganized under new leadership committed to fairness and respect. I walked home through the familiar streets, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of control was lifted, and with it a promise that no one would ever hijack our lives again. That night, I scrolled through the viral posts and paused on a picture someone had taken from the courtroom, a snapshot of Karen's stunned face, just as the verdict was read. The caption read, "When you steal dinner, but lose everything." I smiled, because that was exactly what happened. Her greed, her arrogance, her theft, all had come crashing down like a house of cards. The final scene was not just about stolen food or petty fines. It was about standing up, refusing to be silenced, and proving that justice always finds a way. And as I locked my door, I whispered to the empty house, "Next time you think about stealing from me, think twice, because I'm watching and ready." The story was over, but the lesson was clear, and this time the food stayed right where it belonged.